Have you ever had a man say something to you that seemed harmless, perhaps even kind, but left you with a slight uneasiness? Sometimes it's not the words that matter, but what is hidden beneath them. Denial, manipulation, emotional immaturity, or a silent resistance to growth. If you are not careful, these small moments can turn into relationships that draw you in without you realizing it and eventually push you away. There is a concept that Carl Jung often emphasized, the shadow. In other words, those hidden parts of our soul that we suppress and avoid facing. In relationships, these shadows are often revealed through behaviors or emotional reflections that we unconsciously repeat. This is why recognizing certain phrases does not mean overreacting. On the contrary, it means protecting your inner boundaries and safeguarding your emotional health. In this video, we'll look at 5 obvious phrases you should be wary of. If a man is saying these things to you, especially at the very beginning of a relationship, it's not just a warning signal, it's a clear sign that maybe you should walk away. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the Mindful Sphere channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll be the first to know about new videos to support your personal and psychological development. If you're ready, let's begin. First statement: you must accept me as I am. When you first hear this phrase, it may seem like a statement of authenticity, but if you look carefully, it is often an escape route. If a man uses this phrase as a shield against your legitimate concerns, he is not really seeking acceptance, but rather an escape from responsibility. According to Carl Jung, real change begins when we face our shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. This statement usually comes from a partner who is emotionally withdrawn, passive-aggressive, or constantly deflecting you. He or she puts the burden of change on your shoulders because he or she is not willing to move. Authenticity is not clinging to mistakes, but being open to improvement. The Stoics remind us that our character is shaped not by how we defend our limits, but by how we go beyond them. A woman who is willing to improve herself cannot carry a man who belittles or rejects this effort altogether. If a man is unwilling to face his own faults and tries to convince you to accept me as I am, he doesn't really want to be loved. He wants permission not to change. It is more about trying to defend oneself than accepting oneself. Such people silence real conversations with a mask of vulnerability. They make your every request for change seem like a personal attack. Over time, you become unable to trust your inner voice, suppress your needs, and feel guilty for simply wanting a healthier relationship. But building a real connection requires both parties to take responsibility. As Jung said, facing our shadow is what completes us. A partner who cannot face his or her own shadow does not live a real life. He or she survives only through defense mechanisms. In such relationships, stagnation prevails, not development. But that stagnation is not a safe place. It is an invisible swamp that consumes you over time. Second statement: all my exes were crazy. At first, this sentence may sound like an expression of vulnerability. It's as if past relationships have exhausted and battered her, and she wants to tell you openly. But beware, someone who describes every ex as unstable, problematic, or toxic may actually be positioning herself as the innocent hero of a story. This is not sincerity. It is a politely embellished way of avoiding responsibility. Carl Jung said, "Whatever we fail to make conscious becomes our destiny." If a man has not honestly evaluated his past, he is doomed to relive the same cycles. If he has an implicit expectation that he will be different with you today, this is also a sign of an unhealthy dynamic. Because if one day you fail to meet his/her expectations, you will be put on the crazy list. This approach puts a subtle pressure on you without you realizing it. You start to feel that you have to be careful, to measure your reaction, not to push the limits of his/her tolerance in order not to hear the phrase, "You are just like before." But this is a relationship based on anxiety, not love, and this consumes you little by little. Jung says that projection is not only a defense mechanism, but also a form of refusing to change. Someone who only tells about their past by blaming others has not achieved true insight. And someone who doesn't own his past unwittingly damages his present. A healthy relationship is possible not only by carrying the wounds of the past, but by being willing to heal them together. A conscious woman starts a relationship not to fix a man's past, but to build a new future together. But this is only possible with someone who can take responsibility for the patterns of the past. Third statement: if you really love me, you will do what I want. At first glance, this statement may sound like an innocent expectation. But in fact, love is not an emotion here. It is used as a lever. It is not a request. It is a manipulative condition. Prove that you love me, or you are guilty, is a hidden threat. As Jung pointed out, emotional manipulation is often disguised as compassion. It looks like love, but at its core, it is control. This kind of rhetoric forces you into submission, not sincere sharing. It starts out as a small request, but over time it can turn into sacrifices in which you lose who you are in return. Stoic philosophy reminds us that love can only exist in an environment of freedom, and that a relationship fueled by fear or oppression is incapable of true connection. A conscious woman senses the difference between a sincere desire and a manipulative demand. True love doesn't ignore boundaries, it recognizes and honors them. But if someone makes love conditional only on you following their rules, what they are looking for is not a partner, but a submissive. The relationship then becomes an unhealthy game in which love becomes a test, and your worth is measured by how well you fulfill his or her expectations. More importantly, this form of manipulation eventually drowns out your inner voice. You no longer act to please him, but to avoid disappointment or abandonment. This alienates you from yourself. You ignore your instincts, you silence your own feelings for the sake of maintaining harmony. And this is where the most painful point comes. The compromises you make for love make you more and more alone and less you. But a real relationship does not come to erase you, but to enlarge you. Neither Carl Jung nor the Stoics argued that love is equivalent to surrender. For them, a true bond can only be forged between free individuals. On a ground of saying no, staying true to yourself and mutual respect, true love can blossom. Love does not make you less you. On the contrary, it makes you more you. Fourth statement: you are not enough for me. When first heard, this statement may seem like a criticism, but it is actually much more than that. It is said not because it is true, but to make you believe it. It is not a sign of honesty. It is a defense mechanism that projects your inner emptiness onto someone else. Someone who makes this statement doesn't really see you. They just can't cope with their own lack. As Jung said, in this kind of projection, instead of confronting one's inner darkness, one throws it out. This kind of discourse doesn't work all at once, but gradually. It gets into you. First, you try to be loved with a little more effort. You try to be more understanding, more selfless, more quiet. But this is not the natural development of a relationship. It becomes a competition of worthlessness. You feel the need to prove yourself at every step, but no matter what you do, it is not enough. Because the problem here is not with you. The problem lies in that unsatisfied emptiness. Over time, this discourse starts to distort your perception of yourself. Your inner voice is slowly muted. You start asking yourself, am I really lacking? But the truth is, a woman's worth is not measured by whether or not she is considered enough in someone else's eyes. You are not here to carry someone else's mess, nor is it your job to repair someone's inner instability or insecurity. Such expressions are part of the emotional erosion that pushes you away from yourself, that makes you question your identity. But as Marcus Aurelius said, the spirit of another should not rule over you. You have to ask yourself this question: am I enough for this person? The real question is he someone who can find a place in my world? Remember, a truly conscious woman does not surrender her power to someone else's approval. She doesn't feel she has to prove her identity, because value exists because you are you. It is not a variable shaped by someone else's rhetoric, but a truth that you carry at your core. Before we move on, I really hope that this video has raised awareness for you. If what we have said has stirred something in you, you might consider sharing this content with your friends who are interested in similar topics. Also, if you would like to see more of this kind of content, it would be a great support for us if you subscribe to our channel. You can join us by clicking the button below. Now let's look at the last statement together. The fifth statement: do whatever you want. This phrase may sound like freedom when you first hear it, but in fact it is often a trap. When it is said in a cold, sarcastic or resentful tone, it does not want to set you free. It wants to control you, to immobilize you with guilt. Jung describes this kind of behavior as shadow manipulation. Emotions that cannot be expressed openly are imposed on you in a passive language. You are given so-called freedom, but when you make a real choice, you are left with the consequences. This sentence gives you no direction, but creates a space where your every move can be questioned. Even though what is being said is, do what you want, the subtext is actually this: if you don't know what to do, you will make mistakes. If you make a mistake, you pay the price. So instead of establishing emotional balance, you try to anticipate his reactions, and each time you move a little further away from your center. At this point, a conscious woman stops and chooses clarity. She does not try to decode. She doesn't hold herself responsible for the feelings of someone who doesn't clearly articulate what he wants. She doesn't drown in his directionlessness, but rather steps forward. She walks with gentleness, but with determination. The great danger of such passive-aggressive sentences is that over time they distract you from your own inner voice. Speaking the truth becomes risky, and silence becomes a defense mechanism. It is as if every sentence can trigger an explosion. In such an environment, there can be neither true intimacy nor a healthy connection. As Jung and the Stoics remind us, true peace lies not in solving someone else's emotional turmoil, but in having the courage to protect one's own inner peace. If someone is not openly expressing their own feelings, there is no need for you to try to understand them. Without transparency, there can be no intimacy. Remember, clarity is the foundation of love. Ambiguity is its worst enemy. True love thrives on trust, not guilt. And sometimes the right thing to do in the name of love is not to remain silent, but to say goodbye to that silence. These statements may seem harmless at first glance. They may even sound familiar. But in fact, beneath the surface simplicity lurks a much more insidious and corrosive truth: emotional avoidance, constant projection, and the slow silencing of your intuition. As Jung and the Stoics remind us again and again, The real danger is not always obvious or loud. Sometimes it is hidden in a glance, in a sentence, or in what is left unsaid. Remember, your task is not to do the inner work for someone else that they have not undertaken. You are not here to give up on yourself, to constantly try to prove yourself, or to remain entrenched in an incomplete relationship. You, as someone who values clarity, is guided by honesty and cares about genuine emotional growth, are here to be with someone who is willing to walk in the same depth. That's why having high standards is a matter of respect, not arrogance. True self-respect is not just about loving yourself, it's about what you say yes to and what you say no to. Mastery is not about trying to resolve a troubled relationship or being right. It's about being able to accept with grace when you need to give up. Sometimes leaving is a more powerful action than staying, and remember, everything you allow shapes how others will treat you. So, make your choices wisely. Center your clarity, not your kindness. You have come into this world to be an example, with your own limitations, with your own value. If these words resonated with you, share in the comments those statements in your life that made you pause, that forced you to think. This is a place to remember that you are not alone. And if you are ready to get to know yourself even deeper, develop your emotional intelligence and grow with psychological insights, don't forget to subscribe to Mindful Sphere. Stay clear, stay strong, and most importantly, stay free.